That leads us really nicely onto our sort of next topic, which is around whether things will irrevocably change as a result of this, or whether some things will go back to what we used to consider normal.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thrust of the conversation around what survives and what doesn't survive is important not to close it down right now. I think, it's really important we don't make some assumptions. There's assumptions being made, for instance, that face-to-face is dead. It's not going to happen again. It's 3 months have stopped. It's not like it's, humans require face-to-face. So let's calm down a little about it. But however, I think our attitude and approach to some things will have changed that make them kind of untenable in a way that I think, Allan and I have had this conversation around legacies. I think this is the first shared traumatic moment that the globe's had since the Second World War. It'll be the moment when we go, where were you when? And it's changed your sense of mortality and who you are and what matters to you. And that will change our ability to have a legacy conversation in a way that we might not have done before. So that, for instance, is something that's powerful, that certainly could change. I do think, however, that the stuff that, if you look at what other organizations are doing, they're trying to get themselves into this sense of, we've been kind of following a model of, to get people to anchor themselves to where they are, but to think what that next bit is. So we've been saying, crisis, contingency, you've got to respond, recovery, but transformation is a place to try to think about and be as a deliberate choice. And so in this moment, we have to deal with the here and now of the crisis. We build and I think for lots now in 3 or 4 weeks, it's interesting how things have sort of settled, weirdly. Alan's right. There's an economic wave of horror coming our way we've got to respond to. But, there's a kind of odd normality in these weeks. We are really actively now having space for conversations about what recovery means. And therefore we're deciding, and that giving us chance to test a bit in some of that space where things we know won't happen because we can't, doesn't mean they won't in the future, but let's try some things that we might not have tried before. Obviously there's a shift to digital, but that was inevitable. It's just accelerated it. And the other big shift is, I think, the way that fundraising teams are going to interact and operate will be totally different. I think something like 50% of the United States population could work at home, but only 3% did. They've just predicted, saw a research yesterday that said by the end of next year, 35% will be working at home. So it's capacity now, willingness and ability to do it have changed. So our way we operate and work together might mean that we can cut it back and we can do things faster and quicker. So some of that stuff I think is too soon to close down.
There's also a bit about what people want to do. So I sat on a webinar the other day, and just as a bit of fun within that, there was a question. There was about 150 people on the webinar, and there was a question about if you could go back to the office and work in the office, would you or wouldn't you? And it was split pretty 50-50, and it wasn't, interestingly, from previous research I've seen, quite often the people who want to go back to the office are quite often younger people who, part of the office is part of where their social life revolves around. They often don't have somewhere in their flat that they can easily work, or that one of them can easily work from the flat. But if they're sharing a flat with 2 or 3 other people, who's going to work from the flat that day? Because there isn't really space for 2 or 3 of them to do it. So often it's more complicated than just, or it might be more complicated than just, well, we've got the technology, we can do it. There might be audiences who want to. One of the people who wanted to go back to the office was because they said it was really difficult to have Zoom meetings with their kids walking in and out all the time. And they found that really quite stressful for them. So there's all sorts of dynamics that could change. There's that quote, and I can't remember how it works, but it's about technology, but it feels really relevant to this, which is something like, we tend to overestimate the impact of technology in the short term and underestimate its impact in the long term. And it sort of feels like it's relevant to this.
There's also something interesting about the tech at the moment is that if you think, what, 3 months clearly is a very long time. If you think back to pre-Christmas, before all of this, there was a kind of movement emerging to rebel against social media and tech, and that people were yearning for connection and reconnection with real things. The irony is that reconnection with real things has been enabled because of the tech. Yeah. It's completely flipped it. You know, the first time a Zoom conversation with my parents. Now, you know, Alan, I know you're in a different place because you've got the techist savvy mother in the planet, and you know that, but mine aren't. And so watching and having interaction on a Zoom call with your 85-year-old parents is different, but it's really vital, and people have learned how to do that. You know, I think the other thing, just briefly, one of the other things I think might happen for those people who want to work somewhere is that before, lots of organizations and charities have focused on, for instance, having their offices or their home base. But I could see scenarios emerging now. We've been talking locally about how you could see resurgences of local economies, because you will see a high proportion of people now who work at home but don't want to sit at home all day. And so what was before shared space now might become much more deliberate kind of shared space. I could see offices where charities, say charity fundraisers who are working independently, instead of thinking down the line of the organization, could get together and work together and collaborate.
Why does it have to be charities? Why can't it be just all?
No, I think the point I'm saying is that all organizations are doing that. We're saying the whole of the village here is talking now about an economic resurgence and opportunity. The cafes are talking now about, actually the reality is that, you know, I used to use a cafe all the time to not be here all the time and to go and work, but I'm still working remotely in a way. And I've been used that for years for me. For others, it's brand new. So I think there's ways in which we can now find that getting together again, but not completely lose this as an opportunity.
I think you're right, and it's fascinating, isn't it? Because, you know, if we look in the outside world, there, you know, I think there's a greater sense of, not at a political level, not at all, but I think a kind of like at you know, common person level, there's a greater sense of that connectiveness around the world. But also, I think there's a greater sense of appreciation and connectiveness in the local community. If you look at, you know, everyone supporting the local restaurant through home deliveries. Companies that were delivering to restaurants now delivering to home, and everyone's going local. And I think coming out of this, I suspect we will keep those two things with a greater sense and appreciation of them. And I think, you know, the point you're all making about technology, I'll give you a really practical example of something that we've done and we will retain. So at work, we used to have these town halls. So I'd have a town hall meeting, the whole of my team, 140 people, trying to get them into a room, trying to book a room, trying to get it together, trying to get everything together, really complicated. And, you know, we struggled to do them quarterly. Since we've been in lockdown, every single Wednesday, I've got it at 2:00 this afternoon, I have Ask Marcus, half an hour, and it's kind of like, on this, we set up a team site, people can submit any questions to me in advance, or people can ask me any questions, and I will do my best to answer them. And if I can't answer them, then I will answer them before the next Wednesday or at the next Wednesday. You know, it's fantastic. And actually, what we've done is we've level jumped. So rather than a message from me being cascaded down to my heads of departments, be cascaded down, team leaders be cascaded down, level jumping, talking straight to people. I think there's a greater sense of people having of that connectiveness, people hearing not the message, but the messenger delivering the message. And I can imagine when we get back into the workplace, we'll still continue doing this. And it doesn't matter if we're all sitting at desks next to each other, we will keep doing this because, you know, it's powerful. And I think, you know, that's due to technology. And why didn't we think of it a bit before? Because we've always had Skype. Well, I think need has driven it. And it's Steve's point, you know, I think there are new things that have been introduced. I think there's an acceleration of so much. You know, there's an acceleration of use of technology. There's an acceleration of a range of different things, including, you know, in the last 6 weeks, 5 weeks, 4 weeks, private sector has moved into the social space.
Absolutely.
There's no point in them advertising holidays or advertising whatever. So what they're doing is they've gone deep into social space. They're very much reinforcing brand and their brand for good, brand for purpose. They won't switch it off. That will retain, because I think they're seeing there's a lot of power in it. They will be measuring it, and they will be getting they will give big impact off the back of it that they will keep doing more of going forward. And I think we as a sector need to recognise that. We need to embrace that. And they are partners, and we need to be more willing to embrace that partnership and working with them, because they're in our space now. And actually, maybe they will drive greater impact than many not-for-profits.